It's nice to see so many familiar faces, as well as some faces I don't see so regularly. I hope that people have been enjoying the flexibility of taking the class online in your scheduling. But of course, there's some things for which the interaction is important, and today is one of those times where the interaction is mandatory. Okay, this is part of the exam right now. And the reason is because the take-home exam poses some issues that we don't normally confront in this course, okay, in any sort of direct way. So first of all, let me tell you why I give a take-home examination. Okay, we have, as you know, 3 exams in this class. We have a quiz, which you've already taken. That was in class. And that pretty much just covered mastery of basic material. And then we also have a final, which will, for the most part, also cover, probably 80% of it will cover basic material and for the whole term, and will probably only have about 20% creativity on it. So this exam is the exam of creativity. Okay, and one of the things that I found over the years is that trying to test creativity in a short amount of time doesn't work very well. Okay, that is, if you give somebody, you say, look, you've got an hour or two to to be creative on a problem, people can't be creative. Some things just need to stew around in the heads to make them happen. So so one of the goals of the take-home exam is to appeal to those students who, in fact, don't work as well under sort of the classic examination time pressure. So this exam will favor some people. It will not favor other people who happen to be the type of person who responds very well to what goes on in a short exam. Okay? So it's just by taking different kinds of measurements during the term, I hope to get the best picture I can of student performance. Okay, so that's pretty much why I give the take-home exam. The other thing is that the take-home exam is a great opportunity for learning. And you might say, why? Well, on the problem sets, of course, I have are other opportunities for learning, and of course reading the book and attending lectures and so forth. So why give a take-home exam, or any exam that matter? In fact, I generally view exams as having a dual purpose. One is to accelerate learning, and the other is to evaluate the students. Now, I'll tell you personally, the least favorite thing that I do in any of my classes, and generally, is evaluate people. I really don't like evaluating people. It's sort of like, you're always forced to put people up against some arbitrary linear scale, okay, which doesn't really reflect who they are as a personality, okay, because personalities are, continuously multidimensional, okay? They're very, very complicated, and to put people up against a linear scale, which is what we do all the time at MIT, okay, is not a good summary of somebody's net worth in any real sense. So what this exam measures, no more and no less, is your performance on the exam. Okay, that's what we measure. Okay, and we hope that that to some extent is correlated with your ability, your hard work, your creativity, and a lot of other things that we would like to measure, but it isn't. Okay, it isn't very well. Okay, but it's the best that we know how to do. So so one of the reasons that I give exams at all is because exams raise your stress level, okay, as if you needed your stress levels to be raised. Okay, now, chronic stress is not very healthy. Okay? But periods of stress can be used productively. So does somebody have, when you're under stress, what are the physiological changes that occur when you come under stress? Who's done a little physiology or psychology? What happens when you come under stress? What happens to your body? What happens to your system? Yeah. Increase in heart rate. That's probably the most dramatic observable effect. Yeah. Blood pressure increases as well.
Sometimes you release chemicals in your brain that make it more difficult for you to form new memories.
Okay, that actually happens. Actually, so what you say is somewhat right. Okay, so chronic stress has a tendency to do that. Okay, but normally stress has actually the opposite effect, which is that chemicals get released that improve your awareness, improve your memory, improve your reaction time. Okay, what's the main chemical that does that, the main hormone that does that? Adrenaline, okay? Now, if you're under chronic stress, in fact, the opposite happens because your body compensates. And it says, okay, we're under stress, we got to reduce, we got to try to compensate, and eventually, if you're under chronic stress, it's not a good situation generally, because it doesn't improve your memory, it doesn't improve your reaction time. Instead, you're just stressed out, okay? And there are techniques, by the way, that have been developed to cope with chronic stress. Anybody know some of these techniques? Yeah. Exercise is a very good one. What else? Meditation. Okay, meditation is the one that is, exercise and meditation are probably the two that have the most clinical support for reducing stress. How many people here meditate? Okay, so like 3 of us? Okay. So meditation is very good. So if you haven't tried it sometime, okay, the problem with meditation is always finding time for it when you're under stress. Okay. And the same with exercise. How many people exercise regularly? Oh, that's much better. Okay. That's much better. Good. What other things happen when you're under stress? Yeah. Under chronic stress. Okay. Under stress, actually, one of the things that happens is the release of adrenaline and other hormones, okay, increases your awareness and so forth, but it increases your susceptibility to emotional response. And in that sense, it can decrease your IQ. Okay, yeah?
So what exactly is like the time period required for chronic stress? Like would 5 like really stressful days count as
I'm not a psychologist. Okay?
Wednesday to Monday?
No, chronic stress is when, you're stressed all the time. You're stressed even when there's nothing to stress you. Okay? Even when you go home for Christmas break, you're stressed. Even when you go, that's chronic stress. Yeah?
How would you call for 3 years in MIT?
I would say that could become chronic for people, yeah. I would say our students tend to be overly stressed. I think that's right. Which is why I want to explain why my plan is to increase the stress, okay? Because I don't like the chronic stress, okay? But episodic stress can be very helpful, okay? So one of the reasons that it may perceptibly lower IQ, okay, is because you're more susceptible to emotional reactions to things. Okay, so when people become stressed, so stress was originally, it's theorized, came about because, if you're faced with a lion in the forest, you're under stress. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to have quick reactions, adrenaline, so that you can use superhuman energy to do things, think quickly, okay, and so forth. Okay, but part of that is that you actually drop down from your higher level reasoning very often to your emotional reasoning. Okay, sort of your reptilian brain, as it's sometimes called. Okay, which responds emotionally. Okay, and one of the issues in that gives us an advantage as humans is that we have this huge primate brain on top of the reptilian brain. Okay, and so we can mediate the responses by our emotions. Not always, right? I mean, people are very familiar with the situation where you get emotional about something and then you do something really stupid, right? This is a very common thing. Something which later on you say, why did I do that stupid, stupid thing? Okay, but at the time, you couldn't help yourself, right? But we are given the ability, if you're aware, okay, if you're aware of your emotional responses, you are in a position to mediate those responses. Okay? So you're not, a slave to your emotional brain necessarily, although most of us are most of the time. Okay? As much as we like to think of ourselves as rational creatures, in fact, our automatic responses and doing things because that's the way we want to do them, rather than what's best for us, that turns out to be much more the way humans operate than that everything is carefully and logically considered. Okay? Now, during this examination, one of the panic reactions that some people get because they are not able to control their emotional response to the stress that you're going to be undergoing is to do something that is very, very stupid. Okay? And that's cheat. Okay? This exam gives wide range for cheating, and I'm sure you've all heard and all seen that there is cheating that goes on, surprise, surprise, right here at MIT, the top technical institute in the world. Okay? And so one of the things that I want to do today is make sure that everybody understands the rules for cheating, and also, how to cope with your own feelings during this exam if you happen to be so tempted. So the first thing I want to point out, so hopefully I'm not talking to anybody in this room when I say, hopefully if you are planning to cheat, you're going to consider rationally some of the consequences. Okay? So as I say, I hope nobody in this class is going to cheat. But let me tell you that since I've been giving a take-home exam, so I've been giving a take-home exam for about 17 or 18 years. Okay? So that's the age of some of you. Okay? In the last 8 or 9 years, cheating incidents have gone up. Okay? When my class was small, nobody cheated. Why? They all knew me. Okay? And cheating was something that was, a violation of personal trust. Well, today we have large classes. Some of you have hardly been to class since the beginning because we provide materials online and you prefer to learn in that mode. And I don't want to stop anybody from learning in the way that somebody is most able to learn. Okay? I believe in the learning enterprise. I believe in the values of the university. Okay? So I've noticed this increase in cheating, and I expect that there probably will be some cheating during this exam. However, if you're planning to cheat, let me point out something, and that is you have a whole bunch of classmates here. Okay? Most of them, as I will argue to you in a moment, are not going to cheat. Okay? And if, in some way, they think that you are going to cheat, I would predict that most of them are going to be very angry. Because what we're after here is fairness, in our evaluations. And when somebody cheats, It's not fair to the class. Okay, it's somebody trying to climb up in some ranking order, okay, that we're going to end up with of the scores on this exam, some linear order, and somebody trying to say, I'm up here when I'm really down there. Okay? And that's not fair, and anybody who thinks that somebody else doing that is an acceptable attitude, okay, I hope you would be angry. Okay? Now let me tell you, I will be angry. Why will I be angry? Well, because if I have to deal with a cheating incident, it costs me time. Now, I'm a professor, okay? And let me tell you what I like to do. I like to do things like teach, except I don't particularly like grading and evaluating people, okay? But I like to teach. I like to do research. I don't like to handle the Committee on Discipline. It's very time-consuming. Whenever we have a cheating incident, who do you think I have to talk to? I got to talk to your advisor. I got to talk to the counseling deans. I got to talk to the mental health department because usually I refer the students for counseling of some kind. Okay, I often have to talk to the parents. This is not what I came to MIT to do. I'll do it because I know what my duty is. Likewise, I hope that all you folks understand what your duty is. Okay, in the exam. Your duty is to treat the exam as if it is an in-class exam, even though you have given the freedom to take it home. Now, I don't expect that people will snitch. I'm not one into promoting snitching. But anybody who feels that in some way the exam is unfair is free to contact me and tell me the way in which the exam is unfair, whether it's cheating or some other way. Whether you got sick, if you get sick, please let me know. Okay? If there are issues that come up, let me know. We can be understanding. Okay? So that's one reason, if you're inclined to cheat, not to cheat. Let me tell you why I think that people don't generally cheat. This is a survey. I do a survey every term that I give this exam. And this is the actually, let me grab the other one. This is one that was from last time, but I think actually the one that happened, the survey that I took a couple of years ago was actually, I think, a better survey in that it showed more about the teacher. So this is pretty much the same kind of response each time. Okay? So on the survey, question 1 is, did you cheat? Now, of course, I'm not a dummy. I know that somebody who cheated, okay, can say, no, I didn't cheat. Okay? But let me just tell you what the numbers are, and then you evaluate for yourself what the data means. So I'm not saying this is necessarily whether somebody cheated, it's what the data means. In this case, in the survey, we had 78 responses. So for this, we got 76 people who said no. One person said yes. Okay? And one person had the interesting comment of abstain. I'm just reporting the facts. Okay. Question 2. How many people do you know who cheated? Okay. 72 people said none. Okay. 2 people said 3 people compared answers after the exam was done, but before they handed in. That's cheating in my book. Okay? They didn't change anything, so they didn't feel like they had violated anything from their point of view of morality. but I believe in drawing a really solid line between the black and the white, rather than making a gray line. If there's a gray line, that's harder for you folks to deal with. Okay? It means you have to be judging where you are along the gray and whether I'm along the gray. So the way I try to do it for this class is draw a very solid line, okay, between black and white. Okay? So these people cheated. On the other hand, you can see, you know, as a practical matter, pretty minimal. One person said, I suspect two, but don't know. Okay. One person said either 0 or 2. Okay. One person said abstain. Same fellow. Same fellow. Okay. And one person said 10. Okay? And in fact, interestingly, that was this guy. Yes. Okay, this was the cheater. He said he cheated, and he knew 10 other people who cheated. Okay? Now, that's actually not too much of a surprise if you actually look at the rationale when you talk to people who've cheated. It's not too much of a surprise why they, that they feel that they need to rationalize their own behavior. They say, look, I'm in a system where everybody's cheating. And so therefore, I'm going to lose, in some sense, if I don't also cheat. Okay? And besides, cheating is easier than actually doing the work. Okay, I didn't really study, and so forth. And my self-image, I want to be higher than where it really is. Okay, I want to look better than I am. And I know at MIT that looking good up here, okay, is one of these cultural things that's in some ways more important than actually being good up here. Okay? Are you taking the hard courses? Are you the whiz? Okay? Because you come to MIT and there are all these people who are really smart. So it's not a surprise that you have people who justify what they're doing because they say, well, as much as people might want this to be a good environment for learning, there's all this cheating going on, and so I'm just going to cheat as well. Okay, and Professor Lyserson is full of it. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, so when I've talked with the psychologists in MIT's mental health, by the way, I think that mental health is really a poor term for that office. Okay, they're changing it to things like behavioral health, which I think is also a pretty poor term. My experience is that really what it is emotional health that you're talking about when you talk to psychologists and so forth. Okay, because emotions sometimes get the best of us. And then it's helpful to have somebody who can counsel us about our emotions. Now, emotions are seated in the brain, okay, but they're not seated, and at MIT in particular, people say, gee, there's nothing wrong with my brain. Okay, well, no, but you are a human, okay, and humans have emotional responses. In particular, at MIT, we tend to suppress those responses in a lot of things. In teaching and in your work, how much have I asked you about emotion, okay, on any of the exams I've done? How many people have taken exams on emotion here? Anybody do some psychology anyway? But they'll probably only ask you about the rational part of it, which is the study of it, right? Okay, they don't really, we don't get much education in emotions, unfortunately, okay? And yet emotions are, by psychological studies, the larger part of human behavior and human rationale for doing things. It's much more that your brain follows your heart than that your heart follows your brain. Okay, people rationalize what they do, okay, rather than decide to do something because it makes rational sense and then have full emotional acceptance of what that rational sense is. That's much harder to turn that around. So when I talk with the psychologists, they say that there are two large categories of I guess what they call syndromes at MIT that conflict with the goals of a university as being an open place where people are evaluated on who they are, okay, and what they contribute, not on how puffed up they can be, okay, or how many degrees they have or whatever, okay, based on what's the quality of the ideas and the contributions that people are making to society, okay, and to their friends and so forth. The first one is what they call a bunker syndrome. So bunker syndrome was first studied in the context of soldiers in war, which is why it's called the bunker syndrome. And here's essentially what happens. You have a small group of soldiers who are generally isolated from the other people, and they've got terror raining down on them, enemy out all around, okay, and they're just hunkered down there, just trying to survive, afraid at any moment that the enemy may be coming, that some bomb may hit them, they may all be killed, okay? And what happens is both a very good thing and then a potentially damaging thing. The very good thing is that very strong emotional connections occur between the people. Okay, the people who are in that situation get really close friends. After all, nobody can imagine what it's like to be in that situation except people who are actually there. Nobody else has any concept of the terror and and so forth. Okay? And the second thing that happens is that often that friendship, okay, becomes more important than any of the mores of civilization. And so when they come out, when one of their kind, one of their group commits an atrocity, which is not unusual, okay, is very angry after they get out, okay, and murders children or something, okay, the others, it's much more important that they maintain that close friendship against the world. Okay, and so there's a situation in which those people can go way off any acceptable norm that society has established as part of civilization for appropriate behavior. Very damaging. Okay? Now, how does that apply to MIT? You have terror being rained down on you week after week here, okay, with far more work than can possibly humanly be done by any except the guy next door, or the gal next door who's just this genius sitting in the room there, right? Okay? And I'm sure that some of you have some really strong friendships that they've made in your dorms or living groups or fraternities. Really strong friendships. Okay? Now, that's great. But remember that we're at a university. And the greatest crime in a university is plagiarism. Okay, the greatest crime is representing somebody else's work as your own. So when one of your friends comes who's stressed and has an emotional response and says, come on, you know, this is really rough. Give me some help on this problem. Okay? You are going to have a choice. Are you going to respond in the way that somebody with this bunker syndrome responds? Or are you going to be aware that that's a way that is a very natural way to respond, and you may feel like responding that way, but realize that that is out of bounds with the norms of a university setting? Okay? In other words, are you going to do the right thing? Now, part of this is your value system. And I have no control over what your value system. If your value system measures up the friendship as being much more important than the norms of the university, okay, that's your value system. What I would say is that that's a very relative morality. Okay? It's very easy to make that morality suit your purpose. Okay? Rather than having a morality which, no matter how much it hurts me, I am going to do the right thing. Okay? Which is, I think, a higher level of understanding of values and morality. Okay? So you have to think about that a little bit as to what's going to happen in that circumstance. Okay? Now, the other thing is, let me just say, is suppose that A gives B some help. Okay? Who is more at fault for cheating, A or B? Everybody says this is a trick question. Who's more at fault, A or B, for cheating? Both. They're equally at fault. That's the way I treat it. That's the way MIT treats it. Okay? In some cultures, that's not true. In some cultures, and I'm sure some of you who have grown up in different cultures are aware of this, that it's okay for somebody who's smarter to share, but it's not okay for somebody who's weaker to take. Okay? Not true in this society. In this society, both are equally at fault. Okay? And I will treat them as such. Do you know what the penalty is for cheating at MIT? No, it's not death. So okay? So the penalty for cheating is expulsion. Now, some people may view that as a relief, especially if you're under a lot of stress. But there are much easier ways, even if you have to explain to your parents, there are much easier ways to leave MIT than being expelled. It's a very painful way. Okay? The advantage is that you get a lot of counseling on the way, on your way out. Okay? But you can get counseling while you're here. Okay? There's the college deans. Okay? There's the medical department. Okay? There's your faculty advisor who may or may not be good at this particular type of thing. Okay? So there are better ways to go about this than to precipitate an incident, although it's very common for students who are under stress to not see any way out except to cheat. And I would say in about half the cases of cheating that I have had to deal with, that probably half the time the student was really just crying for help. Somebody pay attention to me. Somebody help me. I don't want to be here. I don't care. Okay? I don't care, so I'm going to just do something, and if they catch me, then I'll deal with that. Of course, they deny that they cheated, but eventually, we get to the bottom of it. So, so in any case, it's a question of value system. Let me tell you the other syndrome that they observe. It's what's called the imposter syndrome. Okay, so the imposter syndrome goes like this. Somebody at MIT in the admissions office made a terrible mistake, and they admitted me. I look around. Everybody's smarter than I am. Maybe I have some level of intelligence, but boy, these other people can work so hard, and there's no way I can work that hard. So they clearly made a mistake. But now I'm sort of stuck here. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is bluff my way through. Because once I'm out of here, then I'll change things and everything will be fine. So the imposter mentality is that the person is an imposter. Okay, this syndrome is you're an imposter and you're going to try to bluff your way through. And one way of bluffing your way through is to cheat. Okay? This is also, quite common in this kind of environment. Of course there are people next to, in fact, I'm always amazed at how many really smart people there are at MIT. Okay? But there are a couple of things that I think are are worth mentioning about this kind of imposter mentality, sort of put it in perspective. The first thing is that that kind of attitude is actually very internally damaging. It doesn't allow you to know who you are. And your folks are all at an age where, and let me tell you, that age never ends, okay? Where you increasingly understand who you are. And then you go on and then you hit middle age like I do and then discover you didn't understand it at all, okay? But part of your goal in life is to understand who you are, what you're capable of, and so forth. And when you start bluffing your way through things, you're lying to yourself. Okay? You know, you really should be after who you are honestly and accept who you are honestly. And do the best you can and not worry. And anybody who is a snob and puts up with sort of the macho attitude of brains, let me just tell you a couple things. One is psychologists have determined that intelligence is 80% inherited. 80% inherited. That means you're not responsible for your intelligence. Okay, except for 20%. Okay? So how can you take pride in your intelligence if it's not even your fault? Okay? It was inherited. 80% of it. Okay? Personality, by the way, they believe is about 50% inherited. Okay, and 50% acquired by certain things. So first of all, get off this thing about, you know, MIT, yes, is prestigious and so forth, but please, you know, come back to earth, okay? We're all just people. People have differing abilities. Second thing is that as much as MIT, the things that you learn and the experiences you've had with your friends and in classes and in your clubs and activities and so forth, okay? Those things will mean a lot to you, but they will not mean very much 5 to 10 years out. Okay? You'll still remember them as a big piece of your life, but you'll discover that you actually have much more significant parts of your life to come. Okay? Well, you say, gee, but you know, if I don't get that A in 6046 this term, somehow my life will come to an end. No. Okay, this course is just not that important in the bigger scheme of things. Okay, it's not that important. Okay, it really isn't. Okay, you know, this may sound funny for me to be telling you how unimportant my course is. Okay, but it isn't that important. Yes, there's great fun material here. Yes, you're going to be able to use it in the future. Yes, I hope it improves you as people. But it's not that important, and certainly the grade is not that important. Say, well, but if I get this, I'll be able to get... You know, this is sort of like life is, you know, this channel, and there's only this one path that's the path of success. Okay? No. Okay? Life is got a zillion paths, and they're all rich, and you have a lot of choices. And whether one thing makes a difference or not, you know, there's lots and lots of opportunity, lots of paths, lots of things to be doing, okay? And this particular course, and particularly the particular grade on this particular exam, is just not that important. And it's certainly not that important to be willing to cast aside your own self-esteem. You are more important than this exam by a long measure. Okay? So, you know, don't, you know, they say, yeah, but if I get a B, my dad will be angry and I'll, nah, let him be angry. Okay? He's him. He's not you. You got your own life. You got your own sense of values. Okay? Be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. And then do the best you can at improving yourself. Okay? But don't try to bluff your way through life. You know, that's not good. In fact, actually, one thing that I sort of recommend is that that you think about the steps that one takes in everyday life to actually engineer your life and engineer your character. what is your character? That's the most important thing you have. That's your reputation. Okay? And part of character is being willing to accept adversity sometimes. Okay? And to get angry about things that it is appropriate to be angry about. Okay? And to be angry in a productive way rather than crashing planes into buildings. Okay? Yes, it's appropriate to be angry about injustice. Okay? It's not appropriate to be angry about the fact that you have the great opportunity to be at MIT, whether you want to be here or not. But you've got to choose for yourself. Build your character. There are a lot of things that contribute to good character, and one of them is being willing to decide on principles. And principles are hard because they're always coming into conflict. Okay? There isn't an absolute thing. So one of the things in the bunker syndrome, for example, is that people say, well, the friendship is the absolute. Okay? That's the most important thing, and that's got priority, strict priority against all the other things. Well, it turns out, unfortunately, morality is much more situational. Okay? Meaning that depending upon the situation you're in, different things come to play. For example, we all know is generally morally it's a bad thing to lie. That's generally something that you're taught as a kid. Don't lie. Okay? But if a Nazi comes to your house and says, are you hiding some Jews in the basement, okay, back during World War II, I think morality would say to me, lying is not the most important principle at work there. It's okay to lie then. Unfortunately, that makes the issues of morality complicated. You have to think them through and think what the situation is and what really are the principles involved. Okay? And that's what I'm asking you to do, not just for this exam, but because we spend so little time on it at MIT anyway, for this exam and for everything that you do in your life. Think a little bit about those issues. Any questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to the exam itself. Okay, well, let's hand out the exam. And when you get it, read the instructions which are on the first 2 pages. So TAs, can I give you some to give to your students? Yeah. Okay. Has everybody had his name checked off by his TA? His or her TA? If you have not, please do it while we're handing out the exams.
Should I just do my student?
Yeah, that's better if you just do your own students. Unless that's not what George did. By the way, this is the hardest lecture I give at MIT. Okay? This is really hard. This is not what I've been trained to do. Okay? This is not what I've been trained to do. I'd much rather tell you about my favorite algorithms. Right here. This woman. Okay. Has everybody been checked off? Okay. So if you haven't been checked off, why don't you just come up to your TA? We can have a commotion for a couple minutes. Yeah. Copy of the quiz over here. Who's your TA? The whole row. But who's your TA?
So somebody just decided to start handing them out to everybody.
Okay, just hand them out then. That's it. Okay, we'll just make sure that. And then if there are any names that haven't been checked, why don't you call them out and make sure that they're actually not here. Okay, so do you have any? So let's go through. People who quiet down for a second. I'd like to each TA to go through and list the name the people in that they do not have checked off. George, why don't you start?
Yep. The only one I have is Yuan Lee.
Yoan Lee here. Absent on exam. Okay, Bob, do you have?
Jim Suka. Here. Oh, you're Jim. Okay. Sorry.
Is that it?
I've got some.
Okay. Rachel?
Hyun Bin Sun? Okay, good. Jeremy Smoller. Here. Ting Well. I think he dropped the class for him.
Okay. Oh. Is that it? Why don't you do your calculations? Jen, why don't you have everybody? And Chong, how are you doing?
Many people want I can't take that.
Do you have everybody else? Okay. Chong, do you have anybody who hasn't?
Yeah, there are plenty who have not come up and got it.
Okay, but okay. So, but how about people who are? Have you got the attendance of people?
Yes.
And is everybody in your section here?
Yes.
Okay. So, who does not have an exam? Raise your hand. And this whole area back here, just give them exams, so we can move on. Whole area back there. Okay, we'll read the instructions together. So the quiz contains 5 problems worth 30 points each for a total of 180 points, 150 points. Okay. The 150 points, just to compare, remember that quiz 1 had 80 points on it. So this is worth almost twice as much as quiz 1. Okay, and the final will probably have about 180 points. Okay, because I tend to, for the in-class exams, have, or for the timed exams, have 1 point a minute is sort of my rule, because it makes it easy from the points to plan things. Okay, so you should do each problem on a separate sheet or sheets of paper so we can grade them separately. So that you should be pretty familiar with at this point. Okay, they are due Monday morning, okay, in this room, between 9:30 and 10:30. Okay? At that time, we'll also collect the surveys, which you'll find stapled to the back, and also that will be the time at which we announce the programming contest. So we have a programming contest, algorithmic programming contest for people who have time on their hands. Okay? But it's a contest which is fairly easy to enter, in the sense that that we give you working code, but it's not very fast. Okay, but more about that later. Okay, generally late exams will not be accepted unless you obtain a dean's excuse or make prior arrangements with your recitation instructor. Okay, and you must hand in your own exam in person. Okay, you can't bring in somebody else's exam, because we're going to be checking off people's names as they hand them in. Okay, the quiz should take you about 12 hours to do. Okay, but you have 5 days in which to do it. Okay, so plan your time wisely. Don't overwork. Get enough sleep. Okay, sleep is important. By the way, it's another way to reduce stress. We will give lots of partial credit. In fact, as we're grading it, we're going to be looking at opportunities to give points. In fact, on this exam, if somebody comes up with something that's really clever and simple and elegant, we're going to give bonus points. So you can get more than 30 points on a problem, even though each problem is worth 30 points. Okay, we will give a lot of partial things. But of course, the better your asymptotic running time bounds, the better your score. And as you'll see when you look at the problems, none of the problems tells you is broken into parts. None of them tells you what bound to expect to get. It's much more the kind of problem that you get when you see algorithms in the real world, but although these are not entirely real-world problems. Write-ups. Now, your solution to a problem should start with a topic paragraph, okay, that provides an executive summary of your solution. So I want to know right up front some very important things, namely what problem you're solving, what techniques do you use to solve it, dynamic programming, or divide and conquer, or you use a range tree data structure, or whatever, okay? What approach are you going to take? Or you build something from scratch, okay? It should also include any important assumptions you make. One of the things that you will find is that some of the problems, there's some ambiguity. Okay, what's ambiguity? Means not clear what the problem is. Could be interpreted more than one way. In those cases, that's not necessarily a mistake on our part. What you should do is make reasonable assumptions, because part of what you will be tested on this is your engineering common sense. Do you understand what a reasonable assumption is under the circumstances? Then resolve it. Of course, if you make too strong an assumption that renders the problem trivial, and you solve the trivial problem, like, your problem is to sort n numbers, and you say, well, let's assume that they start out in order. Okay, then my algorithm, okay, now obviously that doesn't get much credit, okay? So don't assume something that is oversimplified, okay? And also make sure you state the running time your algorithm achieves, what performance bounds you get. I want all that up front before you dive into the explanation of what you're actually doing. Okay, so organize your work so that it can be read and graded. Because this is essays you're writing. Okay, like a research paper or something. Okay, write up your solutions cleanly and concisely so that we can understand them. And be explicit about running time and algorithms. For example, don't just say that you sort n numbers. Say that you're using heap sort, which sorts n numbers in order n log n time in the worst case, if that's what you intend to do. Okay, so be explicit about what you're using. Don't just say I sorted in n log n time. Okay, be explicit. When describing an algorithm, give an English description of the main idea of the algorithm, just like you're used to doing. Okay? Use pseudocode only if necessary, because it's very hard for us to just read pseudocode. Okay, but if pseudocode is a good way of explaining something, that's fine. You can say, here's the code, and here's why it's doing what it's doing. That's fine. Okay, but most of these problems won't require much pseudocode. Okay? I'd much rather have a clear description, have the mathematics that underlies it, and simplifying things. Give examples and draw figures, diagrams, whatever, in order to explain what you're doing so that we can understand it better. Okay? It's important for us to understand, so try to help us understand. Provide succinct and convincing arguments for the correctness of your solutions. Don't just say, well, this thing sorts. Say, here's why it sorts. Okay? Proof by induction. Here's the invariant that we're going to prove by induction, and then prove the invariant. Okay? Don't regurgitate material. Okay, I'm not interested in you telling me things I already know. Assume that I have read my own book. Okay? So use algorithms and theorems from the textbook, from lecture, from videos, whatever, recitation to simplify your solutions. Okay? So any of those things that you can call as a subroutine, if you will, that's good. However, when you call something as a subroutine, it's better if you don't just say, well, using theorem 3.6 from the textbook, we conclude this. You want to say, use theorem, do it the way that I reference things in my own textbook. Use theorem 3.6, which says, da-da-da-da-da-da. Then I say, oh, yeah, and then I don't have to go back to the textbook in order to read. The easier it is for us to grade your problem, unless, of course, it's trivially easy because you didn't do anything. Okay? Generally, the easier, other things being equal, the easier it is to grade your solution, the more the points. If you have something with an appropriate running time, but it's long and convoluted when there's a simple, direct way of doing it, you won't get as many points. Part of what we're looking at is your cleanliness of thought. These are all important things for you to be developing as practicing engineers. Hey, once again, if you find part of the goal of the exam is to test engineering common sense. If it's unclear or ambiguous, make reasonable assumptions, okay, and state clearly what they are. Bugs. If you think you found a bug, send us email. Don't send email just to your recitation instructor. Send email to the course staff list. Your recitation instructor may not be available that day for answering questions, but somebody in the course staff will try to get back to you within a couple of hours. Okay, we're going to be trying to patrol the email things throughout the exam to get responses so we can get back. Even if we can't answer something, you should hopefully have received a response reasonably quickly. And because we have staff in Singapore, okay, there's actually people who may be awake at the same time you folks are. Okay. Corrections and clarifications will be sent to the class email list. Okay? George, I would like to have us send out one thing to make sure that there's absolutely, we've had trouble with this list before. Okay. Please send it out. If people have not received a message from the email list by noon today, okay, let us know. Okay? Because we're going to send it out to everybody. Check your email daily to avoid missing potentially important announcements. Okay? Generally, you've got 5 problems to work on, so there's no one problem that holds you up on your exam in order to do it. Okay. Policy on academic honesty. Okay, now we get to what are the precise rules for this course, and this is where I really need everybody to be in class, because I want to make sure there's no confusion, that nobody comes to me later and says, but we were able to collaborate on homeworks and I thought it was the same policy. It's not the same policy. It's written right here. Here's the policy. The quiz is limited open book. You can use your course notes, textbook, reference materials, any of the handouts, the videos on the thing, on the course web page, but nothing else. Now, if you've been doing something like using another textbook for your daily study, yeah, right, okay. For your regular study, well, no, okay. For your sporadic study of this course during the term, okay, that's fine to use that kind of material. What I don't want is people wasting their time trying to find things. First of all, let me tell you that if you do go searching on the web, which is for material related to this, you won't find it. These are 5 brand new original problems. The course has put, staff has put, I would guess, what, about 50 hours of staff effort into this? Would you guess that's about right? Something like that. 50 hours of staff effort, 10 hours per problem. You look, the problems are 10 hours. Okay? 10 hours. Okay? So we've really worked hard to create new problems. Let me tell you, creating problems is really hard. Okay? And one of the reasons I do it is because it gets, and why I try to have create new problems on problem sets, rather than just recycled problems. Obviously, we have to recycle because it's so time-consuming to do them, but it's so that everybody gets engaged with the material, the TAs included. Okay? So, you shouldn't be using notes or solutions from other times this course has been taught. They won't help you anyway. Okay? But you're not allowed to use them. Okay? I just want to make it clear that you should just treat this like it's an in-class exam. So all these things are, it's an in-class exam, except you get to take it home. Okay, in-class open book. You gathered your materials that you normally use. That's what you use, okay? Now, of prime importance, and this has to do with the in-class versus out-of-class experience, okay? You may not communicate with any person except members of the teaching staff about any aspect of the exam until after noon on December 3rd. For MIT students. Okay, that's to let everybody get things in. We always have some people who think they deserve special attention that we have to deal with. So no communication. Now, when I say any aspect of the exam, what does that include? Is it okay to say, problem 2 is kind of hard, wasn't it? Is that legal? No, not legal. This is like an in-class exam. Is it okay during the exam to lean over to your friend and say, hey, problem 2 is kind of hard, isn't it? No. Okay? Is it okay to say, how's the exam going? No. Can you do that in an in-class exam? No, you can't do that if you had the exam in class. Okay? So don't communicate about the exam. Okay? Keep it to yourself. It is fine if you want to do up the exam on the computer. That's fine to use your computer to do it up. Please be careful about the security of your materials. Okay? For anything that you put in someplace that's online. Don't leave your materials open and around and about for somebody else to come across them. I don't believe in leaving the $20 bill out to see if the cleaning lady is honest. Okay? Because that's tempting her that she might not otherwise be tempted. That's entrapment. I don't want people entrapped. I want people to take an exam where they are not, their emotions won't get the best of them. Okay? And I want you to help in every way you can to make this exam a good experience for everybody. Okay, so I'm really counting on everybody to be careful with their materials, not to be sharing. Now, sometimes somebody does get emotional and does something that isn't in his own best interest, or otherwise does something and then realizes after the fact, that was probably not the right thing to do. I sort of did that unconsciously. If so, please contact us immediately. It is very easy for us to be lenient, to be understanding, okay, and to understand what the situation was and to deal with it appropriately, okay, if we hear from you. If we hear from a third party, it's not so good. Not so good. I mean, we can still be lenient, but now, hey, we have a disciplinary issue to deal with, okay? So please, if you can, if you find that you've violated any terms, or you're wondering if you violated the terms, just contact us, okay? And we can sort it out with you. Okay, much better to do it with us than with anybody else. Okay? If you have any questions, send us email. Okay? And once again, use the course staff list. Now, attached to this exam is a survey on your experience with the exam. It has these 2 questions. And it also has some questions about how hard you found the exam. Okay? Responses will be anonymous. We won't try to reverse engineer the authors from the comments, so it doesn't matter whether you write in your own script or whatever. Okay? So please fill that out and provide that when you hand in your exam. Okay? Now, we're not quite done. Okay? Let's see. I want you to reread these instructions once a day during the exam. In fact, it helps to reread the problems. Okay? And very important, have fun. Now, for the last few minutes of class, I want to try to do the best I can so that people have the most positive experience here. Okay? So I'd like to talk about some test-taking strategies. Okay? And these I've categorized in sort of 4 areas. Okay? So number 1 comes under the topic of manage your time. Okay? So this is advice. You don't have to take this advice if you have a better way of doing these things, but I want to try to give everybody the chance. Some people may have done take-homes, some people may not have. I want to try to give everybody some indication of strategies that generally work well for people. Okay? Okay, work on all problems the first day. Okay, so you're familiar with them, so that they're all spinning around in your head. Because you may be working on one problem. One of the things you don't want to do is get sucked into a problem. Actually, that's the next one. Don't get sucked in. Into one problem, leaving other problems undone. Okay? Sometimes one problem is so compelling and you really think you've got it, and you keep thinking that for hour after hour after hour. No. Make sure you make progress on all problems. Okay? Budget your time. Including contingencies. Okay, in other words, what happens if I'm not able to do what I thought I was going to do? Then what will I do? I'll work on this problem. If I can get it, then I'll write it up. If I don't get it, then I'm going to move on to this other problem. Okay, so budget your time wisely. And replan your time every day. Your strategy. Okay? Take some time before you go to bed at night or first thing in the morning or midday or whatever and say, here's how I'm going to spend my next increment of time. It's worth putting some effort into doing that planning about which problems you're going to look, survey the things, and so forth, rather than getting up and say, oh my God, let me dive into some problem. Okay? Take a look at what you've done, where you stand, and so forth. Which things need to be written up? Plan when you're going to write those things up. Okay, often it's good to write up a different problem if you're stuck on one problem. Okay, because while you're writing it up, you may think of the answer to the other one. Okay, your brain works in funny ways, right? Things sometimes jump out. And you say, how did I think of that? Okay. Okay. Second piece of advice is manage your psyche. Okay? Your outlook on the whole thing. Most important there is get enough sleep. Okay? You can think that you're making progress when you're not. Okay? Adopt a patient and positive attitude. Okay? Just do the best you can. Relax and just do the best you can. You don't have to do, as I say, this course just isn't that important. Okay? So just have a positive, patient, relaxed attitude. Okay? Use your adrenaline productively. Okay? And by that I mean, when you feel the charge, do you know yourself? Do you do better when your adrenaline is pounding, writing things up, or looking at things, or deciding that the adrenaline is there, let me go outside for a run and just relax for a little bit. Okay? So monitor your emotional state, okay, and use things like adrenaline perplexity, okay, and relax and have fun. Okay, this is a fun exam, as much as these things can be fun. Okay? A lot of interesting ideas that are going to be floating around. Okay, some problems we don't even know what the best answer is. Okay? We have some answers, but gee, it looks like maybe you could do a little bit better. Okay, here's some really good ones. Next category. It's the category of brainstorming. It is, how do you generate all those things to come up with the good ideas that are going to actually work? Because one of the things about doing algorithmic problems is there's no algorithm for doing it. Okay? So you gotta, so one thing is, start always with just getting an upper bound. Even if it is loose. Okay? I've seen people who dive in and say, I'm going to get this, this clearly can be done in linear time, and I'm going to work on this linear time thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they waste all their time doing that, and they never do the n squared one. And if they did the n squared one, they'd be able to look at it written up and say, hey, there's an n log n one there. Okay? Instead, they put all their cards into getting the linear, which might not exist. Okay, and then end up with nothing. So start. Don't be so aggressive that you miss the fruit that's hanging there. And very often, if you take something and then you simplify it and understand it in the context of that solution, you can find, oh, what structure of the problem am I not exploiting? Let me try to exploit that to come up with a better way of doing something. Look for analogies. With problems you've seen. Because maybe some things can be approached there. Exploit special structure. Okay, we saw, for example, single source shortest paths could be solved by Bellman-Ford. But if there's some special structure, like all the edge weights are non-negative, hey, you can use Dijkstra's algorithm. That's faster. Or if you discover that the graph is acyclic, can be done faster still. Okay? So good to get a Bellman-Ford type thing. Take a look. Is there a way of exploiting the special structure of the particular problem? Is this the general case, or is this something that could be done in some other way? Okay. Eliminate self-imposed constraints. Okay, so the psychologists always do this puzzle. Okay, so the problem is to draw 4 line segments without lifting your chalk from the board. Okay, that go through all 9 dots. Okay, so you can try doing something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not good enough. How many have seen this puzzle before? Okay, lots of people. Good, 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 good. Okay, so as you all know, the solution, as all of you who know the solution, if you don't, you can either okay, and why is that interesting? Well, this intersection point is out of the box. your mind has a tendency to look at the box formed by the convex hull of this thing, okay, and only look at solutions that sort of go from point to point. Okay? Well, that's self-imposed. Get rid of the self-imposed constraints. Okay? And this is a good example of where, when you get rid of them, you can come up with a solution. You think out of the box, and this is the origin of the term thinking out of the box. Okay? Don't think in sort of the normal way. Okay. Simplify what you're doing, or simplify the problem. Solve the simplified thing and generalize. It's a very common thing to do. Don't try to go necessarily after the hardest problem. Do something a little bit easier. Once you see how that works, generalize it back to the original problem. Okay? Write up partial solutions. Whenever you write things up neatly, okay, it's easier to understand. Write up for your own benefit, not for my benefit. Write it up for your own benefit. Okay? Work out examples and abstract from them. In fact, one of the problems we actually give you, we decided to give you the hint of work out the example. Because I knew that if we just put them up there as here are examples of the problem, it's the one that has the no left turn map on it. If you flip through your exam, you'll see it. Okay? I knew that I would put it there, and there'd be some people who didn't even bother to try to actually solve the puzzle that we have there. But if you solve the puzzle, it'll help you hopefully gain some intuition about the overall problem. Okay? Do sanity checks. Okay, is there a quick way to see whether or not your solution can work or not? Is there a quick way to see whether your solution is correct? More people I get things in where you look at it and you say, gee whiz, you know, how can that possibly be? The running time is less than the size of the input. Okay? You know, generally that's a hard thing to do. Okay? But you get people who will, you know, it's easy to get into something where you make a mistake and you have that kind of thing. Do sanity checks. Okay? Is what you're doing sane? Okay? Another good one is rewrite the problem that we give you in your own words. Translate it into your own notation or whatever so that you better understand what the problem is. Okay. And the fourth thing was for write-ups. Okay. So basically, write up drafts and copy the final version. In other words, solve the problem, write it up, then copy it over. You'll find lots of bugs when you copy it over. Okay? Especially this is important for people who are doing things on the computer. Print it out, read it off with red pencil. Don't just make all your changes online, because then you won't get something that reads continuously and where you realize, oh, I forgot to do this thing or I missed that thing. Okay? You can't just edit online. Okay? It's very hard to get something that's got a smooth flow to it and where you actually understand all the things that you've assumed or whatever. Okay? Lots of people end up with circular reasoning sometimes. Okay, work on shortening and simplifying. Okay, your write-ups. Okay, and don't forget to provide an executive summary. Now, ample partial credit will be offered But unnecessarily long answers will be, I won't say penalized, but the shorter ones will get more credit. Okay? And very important, have fun. Okay? Have fun. Okay, so we'll see you on Monday.